The Utah Utes just announced a key position change that could pay huge dividends this coming season.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. If it's your first time tuning into our show, make sure you like and subscribe. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. You can download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, all caps and no spaces, for $20 off your first purchase. My name is JT Wistrcill, and on today's show, excited to be joined by Athlons Sports' Kevin Borba, writes for several of their college sites, also the host of Locked On Bus, which is big in the second segment because we're going to be talking about Big 12 rankings. Locked On, our Locked On hosted a Big 12 ranking. We're going to break that down. Also talk about an interesting comment a Big 12 coach had on the college football playoff and hopefully getting rid of some of the bias the committee can often have. But want to start with a Utah topic as we are Locked On Utes. And looking at Utah, they announced a key position change that I actually think is going to be massive. They announced a couple, but one in particular to me is really massive and key, Kevin. And that is that Otto Tia, who for much of the offseason I thought was going to end up being their wide receiver one, is now a tight end. The redshirt senior is 6'4", 220 pounds, and he's got the size, but he did not do a great job of separating on the outside in the spring game, what we saw. So I was a little bit concerned, but I think him lining up in the tight end could be huge for Utah, not only as a way to maximize his skill set, but also Utah just had a massive vacuum at tight end with Landon King transferring out. You have Hunter Andrews, who was running back, linebacker, now tight end. Dallin Bentley wasn't great last year to me. To me, Tia is pretty easily and quickly becomes Utah's clear best receiving tight end. All-around tight end, I don't think he's going to be the best at blocking, but third and long, I think Tia is going to be out on the field a lot. I like this move a lot for Utah.
Yeah, I think when you're a program like Utah, who's always utilized a tight end, now granted, brand new offense, like I'm looking at the numbers from New Mexico's offense last year, and their tight end was fifth on the team in receptions with 22 catches for 138 yards, right? So I think it's just based on necessity. I don't know if they're going to be like the Brant Keithy, Dalton Kincaid days where it's like this guy's going to have 60 catches. But I do think that, like you said in the spring game, he wasn't showing maybe what they had hoped. And just because that doesn't mean he can't be a wide receiver one, doesn't mean he can't be a mismatch at tight end, right? Like linebackers going to have to cover him, right? He's probably going to be too fast for linebackers. He's probably too big for safety, so that makes it a little difficult. So they get an automatic mismatch. And then he has the ball skills of a wide receiver, right? I think you and me would both agree that his biggest flaw, quote unquote flaw, is that he's just not as fast as everyone else. Yeah. But like when you look at Utah's wide receiver room, they just have sort of compact, quick guys all over the place, whether it's Creed Whitmore, Ryan Davis, like whoever they just have a bunch of quick guys. And I don't know if he necessarily fit that mold. And I think it's okay that he moves a tight end, right? As long as you're getting something out of him, right? And I think, like you said, Landon King's gone, Brant Keithy's gone, and the rest of the guys you mentioned, and Caleb Lohner, right? You guys automatic touchdown. But I think the guys that you mentioned, it's like those are all nice pieces. But at the same time, I wouldn't want to hang my hat on them and be like, okay, this is our tight end, right? So I think Otto Tia at least provides a little bit of consistency there. And with the change in offense, I don't know, because my biggest question about him now is like, can he hold up blocking wise, right? He's a good size for a receiver, but if he's still 220-ish, we'll just say 230-ish, is that a good enough size for a tight end? We'll sort of see what happens to him blocking wise, and if that even is something that they need, because obviously the offense is very different.
Yeah, it's a very different offense, and it's just a fascinating tight end room. Also, you add in another guy who's now a tight end is J.J. Buchanan. That's an interesting one. I think he's going to redshirt, honestly. He's 6'4", 208 from Henderson. He was a wide receiver, but could be a safety. Like, he can do a lot of things. To me, he very much fits the mold of, like, Teo Johnson was at one point a receiver. They moved him to DB. I could see them going a lot of ways with Buchanan, but Utah's tight end room is fascinating. If you said it's interesting, like, if you ask me multiple questions about a tight end, I could have a different answer. It's, hey, who's Utah's best blocking tight end? Well, it's probably Dallin Bentley, even though I didn't think he was great last year, just overall the size, strength, experience. I think it's probably him. After that, who's the best like receiving tight end? We just said it's pretty clearly Otto Tia as an accomplished wide receiver at the group of 5 level. And I think as a pass catching tight end will do well at the P5 level. And then you get Hunter Andrews, who's the most well-rounded. So that makes it like, it's just a very weird room, but Andrews doesn't have the experience. So who's the tight end going to be? I really don't know. It's a strange one, Kevin.
Yeah. And I think the one thing to note is Utah I mean, I don't need to tell you this, and Utah fans already know this, but Utah predicates themselves off of finding gems in the rough, or diamonds in the rough, excuse me, right? Like, one of their best tight ends in arguably program history came from UC San Diego, right? So like,
Brent Keithy was a 2-star.
Right. Brent Keithy was a 2-star as well. And so it's just one of those things where I think from right now, it looks weird. Like, I wouldn't tell people like, yeah, Utah has the best tight end room in college football. But you told me by the end of the year that Utah had someone emerge as a star at tight end, and like that guy is now going to be an NFL prospect, I wouldn't be shocked, right? Because that sort of feels like the Kyle Whittingham MO. Even with the new offensive coordinator, Coach Beck, it's like Kyle Whittingham's prints are still here, right? Because like, he's moving people around. He's taking chances on guys. And I think at the end of the day, obviously, I think Beck would have to sign off on this move, but I think it's going to work out. I just feel like it looks weird right now, right? It's not like the prettiest, sexiest tight end room.
It's not at all. It's a strange one, but it'll be very interesting to see how it comes together. And, mention not being the best tight end room. It's funny because I remember sitting here last year being like, not Cole Fotheringham. Who's the tight end? Carson Ryan. You had Carson Ryan at the time. You had Brant Keithy. You had Landon King, and then you had whatever Caleb Lohner was going to be. I was like, this is the best tight end room. Like, you have 3 guys that can produce and do all of this. And the problem was you didn't have the quarterback, so you never really even got to see the full potential. And then injuries too. Real quick, one other just intriguing position change on here, not tight end related, but we mentioned the wide receivers and the unknown there. Nate Johnson is listed as a wide receiver. I think Nate Johnson is going to be the definition of just like a gadget guy. I think Utah's going to use him all over the place. I could see snaps at Wildcat quarterback. I could see him lining up as a running back. Some at wide receiver, sure, even though his hands are growing there. His speed has always been what set him apart. And I just think one way or another, you've seen that speed make plays at the P4 level. He has to get on the field some, and I think Utah's going to find a lot of creative ways to put him on the field outside of just lining up as a stereotypical receiver.
Yeah, I think Nate Johnson was always best with the ball in his hands, and he always wanted to play quarterback. That was his whole thing. That's why he left, was because he wasn't viewed as a quarterback, and that's why he went to Vanderbilt, because they viewed him as a quarterback. And I just think someone finally gave him the advice of like, hey, you will get on the field regardless of what position you're labeled as. Is he going to be a every down quarterback? Probably not. Like, I don't foresee that happening, but everyone wants guys who can make plays, right? The more explosive you are, the harder it is to keep you off the field. It's like, this is a little bit of a weird analogy, but in baseball, they always say, if you can hit, you will be in the lineup. It's just a matter of figuring out where you'll be. Like, Nate Johnson can hit, right? He can make big plays. It's just, he wasn't making enough big plays at one position to be there. Now, I think for Utah, with the new offensive system, I think this is probably the best time for him to do this, right? If it was the old system, I would totally get it. I would be like, yeah, I wouldn't want to be the gadget guy in Utah's offense last year, because there was no gadgets, right? It was no it was like play action pass or like a straight up pass. Like, there was no trickery. And so him moving, it honestly reminds me, this is going to be a deep pull from TCU. There was a guy by the name of Cavante Turpin. He's now at the Dallas Cowboys.
Oh, yeah.
And they had, I always remember this, they had what were called Terp touches at TCU. So it was like Cavante Turpin has to touch the ball at least 10 times per game, whether it's kick return, punt return, jet sweeps, screens, whatever. And I think Nate Johnson should be in a role like that, where you designate X amount of plays per game to get him the ball. And that's automatic big play potential, right? Because he's so dynamic with the ball in his hands, and you just got to get it to him. And like you said, the Wildcat quarterback also makes it easier. I don't know how often they'll do that, because obviously Dampier is quite athletic himself, but maybe to give him a break and take away some wear and tear from him, they'll do that. But I really like Nate Johnson sort of being involved in the offense. It's just a matter of using him correctly, which is where my concern lies. But I think Coach Beck will figure it out.
I agree. We both trust him, but it is an intriguing and interesting quarterback room, and it's just interesting to try and predict, okay, who's going to be QB number 2? Just like it's always interesting and hard to try and figure out who in the world is going to win the Big 12. I mean, this conference has crazy parity. It's always wide open. We're going to be talking about the parity in this conference and the recent Big 12 rankings that we, the host of the Locked On Big 12, there are different squad shows, all put out. We're going to talk about that ranking in one moment. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. With Game Time, you can find and get the best deals on seats today. Game Time is always there. Last-minute tickets, Game Time helps hook you up. There's also not even just sports. It's also live music, and you can just make more memories going to theater, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime. You can save up to 60% with their great last-minute deals, whether it's baseball, well, obviously waiting on football season, but you can get ahead on football season still and head over to Game Time. If you're worried about what will happen if plans change too, Game Time has the Game Time guarantee that has a cancellation protection. You also get a panoramic view from your seat, so you know exactly what kind of a deal you're getting, and it's hard to beat their zone deals that get you the best pick in a section after you just pick the section. You can take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price is guaranteed with Game Time. All right, we're going to unveil these Big 12 rankings in a moment, but Kevin, really quick, just because we were talking quarterback, I actually think if Devin Dampier were to ever get hurt, I would rather Utah trout out Nate Johnson and a package with him than Isaac Wilson as QB2, barring an improvement. Where would you go if Dampier gets hurt if you're Utah's offense?
Home? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I feel like you probably have to go there. I know the freshman there's another freshman in the room. His name's
Bert Ficklin. But we just did that last year. Like, I don't know if I want to do that again.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I'd probably go Nate Johnson out of experience, but I really would not want to be in that situation. I think this is the hard part of, like, we have to trust in the coaches that they developed Isaac Wilson. But I think part of the reason that Isaac Wilson struggled was the mental aspect. And so I felt like his confidence was a little shaken last year. And I hope mentally he's ready, right? If he's mentally like the confidence that we saw him in the spring game last year, because that was a different player than what we saw throughout the year.
True.
Then I'd be fine with Isaac Wilson. But if you're going to tell me like ahead of time, be like, hey, Isaac Wilson's going to be improved a little bit, but he's still a little skittish, I'd be like, okay, well, let's just get Nate Johnson out there and we'll sort of run a triple option-esque offense.
I think what's hard with spring games too is you can't get hit, and Wilson really struggled with pressure. When I looked last year, I always said, like, what was the biggest issue with Utah's offense? To me, it was not the offensive line. It wasn't even receivers getting open. It wasn't play calling. It was at the end of the day, it was Wilson to me. It was the quarterback play just wasn't there. The time, like, there were guys open, and the timing and the throw just wasn't there. And that's where hopefully Wilson's improved, but it'll be remains to be seen. I think your first answer said it best though. Like, it's just like the season's over again. If they get a quarterback injury, I don't see how Utah wins the Big 12. And that is what Utah wants to do. And they have not been projected to do so as they were last year by most preseason selection polls. They're an intriguing candidate to bounce back and rise up. But we at the Locked On Network, and you and I both as well, did a Big 12 preseason ranking poll. So we compiled our list. The Big 12 Conference is actually not doing one this year. So we at the Locked On Network said we could step in and do one. So here is the list for those of you who are listening on audio. ASU ranked first with Kansas State second, Texas Tech third. Then you have Baylor fourth, Cyclones fifth, BYU sixth. Some of this was locked in a little bit before everything happened with Retzloff, so I'm curious to see if that would hold among our Big 12 hosts. TCU 7, Utah comes in at 8th, Jayhawks at 9th, Buffs at 10, Cougars, that being the Houston Cougars, at 11, Oklahoma State 12, West Virginia 13, Cincinnati 14, UCF 15, and Arizona 16. So first thing I guess we could just bring up right away is Utah at 8. I had Utah much higher. I've said on multiple occasions, Kevin, I believe this Utah team will finish in the top 4. Honestly, this conference is still loaded with teams that can win the Big 12. The parity is still incredible. I could see 10 teams personally winning the Big 12 this year, but last year ASU wouldn't have been in my list of that too. So that shows you how crazy this stuff can be. You see Utah at 8. You compiled this ranking. I mentioned I had Utah in the top 4. Honestly, I'll just split. I had Utah too. Like, I really think Utah is going to reach the Big 12 title game this year. I'm high on them. Probably shouldn't be a surprise. People listen to the show. Where did you have Utah? What do you think of them at 8?
Yeah, so I had them one spot up at 7. My top 6, I'll just run through it really quickly. I had Texas Tech at 1.
Same.
I like their transfer portal class a lot, and they returned like everyone. So I was in my head, I'm like, okay, they just got better players and didn't really lose much. So Texas Tech 1, ASU 2, Kansas State 3. I was higher on TCU than most. I had them at 4, Baylor at 5, Iowa State at 6, and then Utah at 7. The reason I had Utah at 7 is I think they're more dynamic on offense. I think the defense is going to be good, because I think people hear 7, they're like, that's not good. That's still, you're still in the top upper echelon of the conference, and like that could still indicate a 8-4 record, maybe 9-3 if things are really complicated, which I expect them to be. But I really, in one sense, I'm really high on Dampier, but at the same time, the turnover problems at New Mexico have me hesitant, right? He had 12 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. So theoretically against better defenses, that could get worse, but at the same time, he has better people around him, kind of. So I think, I don't know, like he's a question mark to me, because at any given moment, I think he could be the best quarterback in the Big 12. At the same time, I do think that maybe his tendencies to be a little risky could hurt him. Right. So that's why I have Utah there. It's big. It's pretty much a quarterback question for me. Like I think he can be good, but I need to see it. And a lot of what you'll notice in my, I had notes on my Big 12 rankings, and a lot of it was quarterback based, because I do think the quarterback is the driver of college football. Like I had BYU at 14 because of their quarterback questions, right? Like I knew that Jake Retzloff, even barring any legal troubles that came to fruition, I knew the honor code was going to play a factor, right? So I was like, that's already, I don't know how many games, but I knew he was going to be out there. And like the teams whose quarterbacks I trusted the least were at the bottom. So he's in the middle because I trust him the middleist.
Yeah, I know. And I think that's absolutely fair. I mean, 12 interceptions is 12 interceptions. It's actually what Retzloff threw last year too, crazy enough, because those guys were compared so much until this whole fallout has now happened. But I mean, there is a lot of new pieces that Utah's bringing in too, even though Jason Beck and Devin Dampier are familiar with one another, even though the offensive line is back. I do say this on my show all the time, and this is someone, me being, I'm high on Utah this year. The whole thing last year was everyone was raving about Oklahoma State getting all 5 starters back. Their offensive line was abysmal like last year. They were not good, even though they had all 5 starters back. And obviously Lomu and Fano are going to be good. They're first round projected picks for a reason, but the interior, there's some questions there. The wide receiver room is, I mean, Kevin, it's not good. Like if we're ranking among Big 12 teams, I haven't gone through that. It's probably a bottom 3 in the conference. Like it's not, and you're relying on a Tobias Merriweather to surprise us and step up and do some things, but all the other guys really aren't proven in a large way. So, and then defensively too, your defensive line was absolutely gutted by transfers and NFL draft guys. So yes, this is a Utah team with a history of good defensive line, but are they going to be able to generate the pressure? I don't know that. I like the secondary. I like the linebackers, but there are questions here. And you mentioned it too. Like, I think the reason like you would have a TCU over a Utah is a Josh Hoover. Like we know what a consistent passer he is. I'm a little bit lower on TCU. And when I say lower, TCU came in at 8 for me, just because of some of the other pieces around there, the defense not being great last season, as well as there's a lot of new on offense, like a lot of the skill position players they got to return and kind of tweak that too. But you also mentioned it, like it's not a slight to have Utah at 7. It's not at all, because you know, it was 7th in the Big 12 last year was Texas Tech. They literally beat the top 2 teams in the conference. They were 8-5 overall and 6-3 in Big 12 play. 6-3 in a conference like the Big 12, where we both agree that several teams can win it, is still a good season, and obviously would be a much improved one for Utah based on just how bad things went last year, honestly.
Yeah, I think it's just, there's a lot of questions around Utah. You mentioned the wide receiver room. Like I do think that there's potential there, right? I just feel like
that's a nice way to put things when you have like no idea what they're going to be. Because that's nice.
Yeah, I mean, that is truly like how I feel though, right? It was, I think part of Utah fans were hoping seeing back, and that didn't happen. You bring in Tobias Merriweather, who's 6'5", so he's huge, right? Larry Simmons is another guy who's interesting. Justin Stevenson, like they brought in a lot of G5 talent that's interesting, but does that translate to this level? We don't know, right? And like I think that's sort of my holdup. Like I'm not surprised that you have him at 2, but I feel like you had to talk yourself into that, if I'm being honest, where you're like, maybe.
Get out of my head. Get out of my head, Borba. Don't do this.
Sorry. It's scary out there. There's a lot of voices.
It's like Devin Dampier. Yeah, it's all the time. It's like Devin Dampier is good. He didn't throw 12 interceptions. He won't throw 12 interceptions this year. That's basically the internal dialogue. And I do think Dampier will do well too. But there's just a lot of questions with a lot of these teams too. You and I are both high on Tech. You have to talk yourself into, okay, can it's a quarterback, Marion, right? That's his name, right?
Baron Morton.
Oh, Morton, excuse me. It's Morton. Can he stay healthy? He's gotten hurt a lot in the past too. Can all these new pieces actually come together? And also, can you just actually get over the hump and win the thing? Like that was the thing with Utah back in the day, right? Like it was like, oh, there's years they'd get close, they're right there, and then boom, they'd they'd fall apart. I mean, you and I actually have our top of the conference very similar, except for obviously I mentioned the Utah thing, but like my next is Arizona State, Kansas State, and then Iowa State, Baylor, Kansas, TCU. Like we have a lot of these teams just in a different combination overall too. I think two teams that are very interesting that you and I, well, actually I'm curious to see, because you are locked on Buffs. I'm curious to see where you have Colorado, but I'm also lower on BYU. I put them at 10 just because I felt like the sum of their parts, the roster overall is still good. I covered McKay Hillstead in high school a little bit. I think he's going to be the guy there. I still think they can win games with him and be respectable. I just don't think they're going to crack the top 5 of the conference this year with the guy that is still a backup quarterback. So you mentioned BYU a little bit. How do you see your Buffs though? I am curious. Like Colorado, so much newness. There's Deion's health kind of hanging over them. What do you think of Colorado?
Yeah, I think that is interesting. I have them at 8, so one spot under Utah. My biggest question for them was, can they adapt? I think, and everyone knows this quite well, Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter kind of ran the show in the sense of like everything ran through them. They have a really good receiver core too. They had the most wide receivers drafted out of any program this past year. So they lose 3 NFL wide receivers plus your best corner, your quarterback, who I don't want to get into the whole Shedeur thing. I think he was a really good college quarterback.
Agreed.
I was shocked he fell that far. But I don't want people to use his draft slide to diminish how good he was. He literally
Utah's defense looked silly a couple times last year.
He left Colorado. He was at Colorado for 2 seasons, one of which they went 4-8, and he left with over 100 school records. So clearly he was doing something right. But I have them at 8, and my question is, can they adapt? Right? They brought in the running back room is kind of the same. They brought in one addition. The receiver room is pretty solid, I would say. They brought in a lot of intriguing guys there. Plus they have some returners. But my question is, Pat Shurmur, offensive coordinator, former New York Giants head coach, he is now tasked with calling the offense for real, right? I think last year it was like very much like, okay, call the offense, but don't take the ball out of Shedeur's hands, right? Don't make Shedeur not make plays for us, or don't not feed Travis, or don't do that. Like now it's his offense, right? And I do think there's a lot of pressure on him. I don't think people realize this, but Deion Sanders, He'll pull the trigger quickly on an offensive coordinator. Shedeur Sanders had played for 6 offensive coordinators during his college career. And he was only in college for, I think, 3 years. Right. So 4 years,
Yeah.
But still, like, he is a guy who, if things aren't going right, he will make a change. So Pat Shurmur is the big question for me. Defensively, I like what they brought in. They brought in a lot of SEC bodies, right? They brought in an Alabama transfer named Jaheim Otis, who's 6'5", 320-ish, right? He's a big dude. I had our Locked On Alabama host come on, and he was like, he's an all-American talent. It's just putting it all together mentally in terms of like effort level is their thing. So I think Colorado is a more well-rounded team this year. I don't think they have as much star power as they did last year, but at the same time, I feel like the roster is better, if that makes sense. Like the offensive line should be better. And again, I said this last year, if Colorado had an average offensive line, right? Average, meaning Shedeur Sanders is not getting sacked 42 times, they probably make the playoff. I'm fully confident in that. And so we'll see. But yeah, I have them at 8. BYU I had at 14 because I feel like I wanted to go back to that because I know we talked about it a little bit.
Yeah.
I feel like they have a decent strength of schedule. Like the FPI has them at 74th. So ESPN's FPI has them as the second easiest schedule in the conference. That being said, I don't know if McKay Hillstead. McHale, thank you. I was like, why can't I say his name right now? I don't know if he's enough, and I don't trust a true freshman Bear Bachmeier to sort of be that guy right away. So that's why I had them so low. And I think they were a big winner of 1-score games last year. And I know
they were.
A lot of people are like super high on that, but 1-score games really don't mean much. Like TCU, the year they went to the playoff, 1-score game galore, and then the next year I don't even remember.
They missed a bowl game.
They went 4-8. They lost to Colorado at home on the. That was Deion's first game, right? So I don't love the whole like they won close ones last year. They could do it again because there's not really proof that ever happens, right? So I do think they're due for a step back.
Totally agree. Oklahoma State did the same thing 2 years ago, and they were the worst team in the Big 12. Speaking of worst, real quick, I have West Virginia at 16. Who do you have?
Yeah, let me see. West Virginia. Yeah,
you had West Virginia too. It's just so much. It's newness. There's this weird rich rod thing. It's hard. Like there's several teams I could see being the worst, but I just don't like it. I think it's not going to go well year one.
I really pondered. I flip-flopped them in Oklahoma State like 3 times.
Same. That's my 50.
I literally, these are my notes. Oklahoma State, a fizzling of Mike Gundy, weird quarterback situation. West Virginia, they returned 3 starters. Iffy quarterback situation at best, right? Yeah. I know our good friend over there, Mountaineer Paul, is high on Jalen Henderson, but it's like I don't love that team. Like I'm not saying Rich Rod won't turn the program around, but I don't think it's going to happen this year. Like I think the Big 12 reminds me of the Pac-12, our old stomping grounds, where it's like there's too many good teams, and so like if you're not one of those teams, like it's either you're in the mix or you're really bad, is what it feels like.
I totally agree, and I feel like West Virginia is going to be in that camp. I'm curious to see how. Speaking of the old Pac-12, Arizona is so intriguing to me. Just obviously disaster last year. I really like Fafita still. I think they can do something, but I don't know.
I had them at 14, or no, excuse me, 13.
Okay, do we just say I had 13? So it's actually kind of funny how similar some of these rankings are, but we'll both be talking about these rankings more on our shows in the future too. Really quick before we get out of here, Joey McGuire, the coach at the team that you and I both have winning the Big 12, actually, Texas Tech, had an interesting quote on the college football format. We've got to take some of the more bias out of the conferences, that this is a tougher conference because of this and that. Let's fight it out on the field. I love that quote, and that's why I want to see more of. I was really glad that the committee put SMU in. I think they deserve the right to be put in. I think people looked at SMU, Indiana losing like, oh, there's such an indictment on them, but then Tennessee gets their doors blown off. To me, the takeaway in the first round was, oh my gosh, it's hard to beat a really good team in their building. Hence why you go at neutral site and you see Texas and ASU. That's a crazy game. Texas was blowing them out early, but then ASU honestly should have won if they can just get a stop on 4th and 13, not even talk about the penalty. So I really do want to get some of the conference bias stuff thrown out, because at the end of the day, really good teams are really good teams, and I still believe in any given Saturday.
Yeah, I think I'm all for playoff expansion. I really am. I think it's cool. The more teams involved, the more it feels like the more people are playing for. Like I know people are like, oh, it diminishes the regular season. Not really, right? Teams are still fighting for their lives. I think it provides more opportunity, and you could tell me like, hey, say Boise State's never going to win the championship. That's fine. I don't care. I think it's fun to see them make it to the playoff and give Penn State a run for their money, or like Arizona State, right? It was cool to see them to give Texas a run for their money. SMU, I don't think played a good game, as well as like I mean, Kevin Jennings sort of folded under pressure, but
defense was okay.
Yeah, the defense was solid, right? So there's so many cool moments that we wouldn't get if we were just like looking for those quote unquote best teams, right? Like, or those top tier teams, right? So for me, the playoff, I love the expansion. I do. Like I said, it gives more access, and I think that's all what we wanted, right? I think the reason people got tired of the 14 playoff, which ironically, I was thinking about this the other day. In the NBA, it was the Cavs and the Warriors every year, and then in college football, it was pretty much, it felt like Alabama, Clemson every year, like on and off, right? So people just wanted more parity, right? And we got that, but now we're deciding how much parity we want, and we're deciding how we get it. And I think we need to do away with the committee. This is my take on this. Get the committee out of there, bring back the BCS system in the sense of like the computer ranking. And I just feel like that eliminates all of this discussions. One, because I feel like the committee is unbiased, but at the same time, I don't know if they are. I'm not in the room where it happens, right? I'm not Alexander Hamilton. I'm not there, right? So I don't love the human element. I don't love these automatic, like, hey, give us 4 teams because we play in a tougher conference. Like, I'm sorry. Like, cool. Like, if your team's not like Tennessee was a 4th team, we'll just say, I don't know how many the SEC had off the top of my head.
They got 4. They got 4.
They're terrible. Right. I think the 4th, Indiana, I mean, I feel like they deserve to get in, right? But their resume wasn't great. They didn't look good either. Right. So I don't know why we're doing automatic bids that are so big. Right. I don't love that. Just let the computer system please come back, or let the committee decide who the best teams are and rank them each round or whatever. But I don't love the system. I do think the bias is a really big thing. And I think if people are ignoring the fact that ESPN is so heavily involved with like playoff seeding and or the playoff, excuse me, like the TV time. The TV
deal. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. I feel like that's a big factor, and I don't know I don't like thinking that there could be a conspiracy theory, right? I just want it to be straightforward. I want the data to speak for itself is all I'm saying, I guess.
Yeah, it's concerning. I mean, there's definitely a level of bias I feel like there is, and I'm hoping, and especially now, like they talked about, the SEC and Big Ten want there to be that bias. They talked about trying to use ratings as a way to get more teams in, which I generally think that would be like the worst thing to happen in the sport. So really curious to see how all this ends up shaking out, and hopefully they can figure out a way to eliminate some of the bias because it's out of control. Kevin, always great having you on. 115 days. Just looked it up till Utah plays Colorado too. So we'll eventually be doing a crossover at some point again in the near future. But in the meantime, please let everyone know what you have going on with Athlon and Locked On Buffs.
Yeah, over at Athlon, I'm covering every sport imaginable. I've written golf to WNBA to football. So I do everything there. And then I'm over at Locked On Buffs, where I'm keeping you guys updated on pretty much everything that's happening and not happening, right? Colorado is being weird as usual. They're sending 2 quarterbacks to Jerry World next week. Coach Prime's probably not going to be there. I don't think he's back on campus. So I got you guys covered on the latest on Colorado. So check me out over at Locked On Buffs.
Kevin, thanks again for making the time.
Yeah.
That's going to do it for today's Locked On Utes. We'll be back with you next week, getting you geared up for Big 12 Media Day. Should be a fun one. We'll see what all comes out of it and continue to keep you covered on the latest with Utah athletics. We hope you'll join us then.